All right, item 2, Economic Development Action Plan. The proper course is to let the chairman of that and other committees. Chairman Greenwald.
Good evening. Mitch Greenwald, Ward 2 City Councilor and the Chairman of the Economic Development Committee, otherwise known as the ED Committee. To my right is certainly more than my right-hand person, Rebecca Landry, who was extremely instrumental in the production and the conduction of this committee. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank you for holding this discussion. I was unavoidably detained on vacation, so I thank you for holding off the full discussion so it could be presented. Also, I'd like to recognize members of the committee, many of whom are here. Councilor Hansel was on it. Mike Giacomo, I don't know, get confused. Jack Dugan is not with us this evening, but he was on it. Tim Murphy, Cindy Rodenhauser-Stewart, Phil Suter from the Chamber of Commerce. Joe Wallier is here. Tim Murphy, yes, he was here. And Rebecca Landry, as I said. We had guest speakers that came in and presented during the process. Dan Henderson from Keene State College, Greg Johnson from HG Real Estate, Molly Kaler from New Hampshire Department of Resources and Economic Development, Rhett Land, Dan Langiel from the City of Keene, Jim Fippard from Brickstone Land Use Consultants, Tim Riley, who is a realtor in Manchester, and also Vice President or Secretary of the New Hampshire Association of Realtors, Lee Robitor from NBT Bank, John Rogers from City of Keene, Greg Osolovi from River Valley Community College, and Steve Thornton from City of Keene. Our goal in bringing in these guest speakers was that we wanted to hear the good and the bad. What is Keene doing right? What is Keene doing wrong? And I think we really heard quite a bit. Certainly, I'm not going to take you through the whole presentation. There was an excellent PowerPoint presented at the last council meeting that went over specifically a lot of the findings. Contained within the report, there's quite a bit of very long-range valuable information that is not just applicable to this committee and this discussion, but a lot of other issues regarding our demographics, a lot of the assumptions we make in terms of our populations and our incomes and and what's going on. So I urge that this be continued and used in the future. Big finding that came out of the whole process was that it's not just a 3-point or a 4-point, it's more like this whole swirling mass that has got to be accomplished pretty much all at once. We've got to grow and educate and retain our workforce, and to do that, we need to provide affordable housing and what we're calling, or what I called, entertainment opportunities. In order to get the workers, they have to have jobs, which means that we have to go out and recruit. In order to get the businesses to come in, we need to simplify regulations and at the same time make everything more development friendly. So among the things that are being recommended is simplifying our regulatory process, rebranding the term code enforcement, because to me that has always struck me as a very negative term, to say the least. And I think the recommendation was something on the order of community development. We need to confront the increasing cost of property taxes and energy, which is discouraging the influx of new industry and also making it difficult for young individuals to want to live with us. One of the major issues that needs to be dealt with is high-speed internet. We're never going to have a railroad coming into Keene. It's unlikely we're going to have an interstate highway, but we can have high-speed internet if we work with the regulatory bodies to encourage the availability. And I'm sure Rebecca can speak a whole lot more knowledgeably than I, but I've just heard repeatedly, if industry wants to come to Keene, We have a great quality of life, but that only goes so far. We need the internet, and that's a major fact. And bottom line is we need to constantly rebuke the perception, and the word is really very important, perception, that Keene is not friendly to economic growth and development. Part of what we heard during the presentation is some of this goes back to the 1980s, or the 1970s even. I'm sure we've heard crazy stories about Ford Motor Company wanted to build a plant here in Keene in the 60s, but they shut them out. So, whether that was true or not, I highly doubt it. But there was a very sincere concern with the coming of a potential mall in the 80s. And probably that was a good concern, because if we had the mall, it probably would be an empty mall. But nonetheless, it got out into the development community that we have a lot of regulations and a lot of hoops and a lot of standards, and that just is not the economic climate at this time. So what is important is we need to get it out there to the development community. We're open for business. That leads to a number of more specific short-term, long-term goals that need consideration. And I thank Council Hansel for running them up the flagpole at the last meeting. And it just got a little confusing, at least in my mind, that without presenting the report as a whole, the implementation gets a little confusing. So I think that could be worked out. So ultimately, my request, Mr. Chair, is that the committee recommend to Council the adoption of the Economic Development Plan and suggest the manager begin plans for implementation. More specifically, because these are complex issues, a lot more complex than they seemed at first blush, the 79E and the development zones, this is an economic development incentive, needs to be researched. It's not just write up an ordinance to say that we're going to do it, because I don't think we know all the consequences, good or bad. On the surface, it sounds great. It's a development tool, and that was the goal of the committee, was to put the toolbox out, and then hopefully staff would research it, and then we could vote intelligently. The formation of the so-called BART team, Business Advocacy Response Team. Good idea, but it needs some research by staff and discussion by council. Is it all public? Should there be staff involved? There are right-to-know laws that get involved. There's confidentiality that gets involved. So that needs to be discussed and fleshed out. The rebranding of the Code Enforcement Department. Definitely a matter for the manager to work on, because it's not just changing the name, it's potentially how do you work in code enforcement, zoning, planning, fire inspections, and even some functions of public works. So that's a task for the manager to try to sort out. Within the longer-term discussion, marketing. Do we do it in-house? Do we hire a consultant to work with us? How do we do it? All the committee do is say, we need marketing. Figure it out. The reduction of regulations, some of this is being discussed within the land use master plan rewrite, or George, what your committee?
Land use code update.
Yeah, thank you. Some of that, but how it's implemented, manager and council dealing with the internet is another challenge. And then finally, recommendation to the mayor that the Economic Development Committee Phase 2 implementation be reformulated. So that's my speech. I won't keep you till 10 o'clock. There are members of the committee that are present, and Assistant City Manager is here and perhaps wants to fill in some blanks or questions, whatever you like.
Would you like to?
Rebecca Landry, Assistant City Manager, IT Director. Happy to take questions, and I would really appreciate the opportunity for people on the committee, if they wanted to say anything, to have a chance to do that.
Sounds good. I guess let's,
You have questions, or do you want to take committee?
well, I don't at the moment.
It's your committee, why don't I ask
You know, I mean, I support this. I think the three things that Councilor Hansel mentioned 2 weeks ago, they're in there. We should be definitely doing them. I mean, my question is, how do we proceed going forward? Do we basically hand this to the city manager? He comes back with a timeline and a plan? I mean, which is how I would take it. So let's see if we get questions from the committee first, then we'll open it up to the public. Bob, please.
Got a couple of questions. Thank you very much, and for all the hard work from the entire committee. If I've got a product that costs an awful lot of money, I can't keep telling my customer, well, if I can sell more of these really expensive products, then they'll come down in price. We have a very expensive situation here in Keene because of our taxes. What efforts did the committee focus on trying to cut spending to try to drive the cost of coming here down to try to attract businesses?
I think the goal of the committee was more with an awareness that there's two variables, cutting the spending or increasing the revenue. And increasing the revenue without increasing the taxes means bringing in more industry, more properties paying taxes. So there's an awareness that spending's got to be controlled, but the focus was more bring in more tax-paying entities.
So the focus was more on bringing entities in
Yes.
to a high-cost environment rather than cutting spending to try to lower the cost of environment to attract more businesses.
Well, Counselor, the job of the council is to try to cut the spending. Our
Well, some of us are trying to do that, but
I know.
and then the second question, and maybe this is better for Rebecca. So my understanding is Fast Roads was is a broadband initiative that was partially funded by the federal government, as well as some local businesses and nonprofits, et cetera. And they identified, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like 26 or 29 institutions, entities around the city that would be ideal for this broadband internet. And my understanding is only 2 of those 26 or 29, or whatever that number was, actually signed up because everybody else already had a broadband situation that satisfied their needs. So my understanding that the demand and the discussion around broadband is really not a matter of we don't have broadband here. It's a matter of those who want faster speeds, the cost of delivering that last mile really is what we're talking about here. Because we have a number of different fiber optic networks that run through here. We do have some institutions that have their own satellite relays and they run broadband within their institutions. But I'm wondering, what is it that the city can do relative to zoning, for example, such that hybrid situations could be set up to kind of lower the cost of that last mile, so that maybe wireless network, high-speed networks could be deployed in certain neighborhoods. But that's something that maybe the city can't do right now because of current regulations. Is that something that we're looking at? Is that something that we can do?
I don't think zoning is a barrier to broadband development, and I would say that the numbers that you put forth about Fast Roads are not accurate. Actually, there are a number of Fast Roads customers in Keene. They started by connecting all the community anchor institutions free of charge as part of the grant. That was part of the requirement of the grant from the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program. And so they connected, including City Hall and the water treatment facility and the police department and the fire department. They provided fiber optic connections to the Fast Roads network, as well as all the schools that wanted it, libraries, you name it.
I've been told by the business director for SAU 29 that they are in fact not on Fast Roads, that they are not paying for that service. Thank you.
There's one school that opted not to install, and that is the middle school. I don't know why the school system hesitated to get hooked up, but now the people who are involved in IT at the school are very much trying to get on that network, or any network that provides a better speeds for their schools, particularly at the middle school. So I'm trying to remember your question. I don't think that the zoning right now is a barrier to broadband development. There are some very capable, one in particular, Fairpoint, is a very capable broadband provider. Yet, whether it's Fairpoint or the cable company or it's wireless provider, which there are a few around, We had a business call me last month, or perhaps I get these calls all the time, so just a couple months ago, a business that was in a downtown Keene environment needed to move because they were growing, which is great. They provide their services online nationwide. They wanted to move into a building. They were looking at the Colony Mill. I know that the use of that building now is up for question in terms of what the future of that building is. When they looked into getting those broadband services in that building, they couldn't get them right in downtown Keene. So they needed better broadband than they could get in that building. And the providers who are here in town and can provide fiber-based services said, okay, we'll bring it to you, but there's going to be a pretty big installation cost. And the monthly cost was 3 or 4 times what you'd have to pay in whether it's East Central Vermont or in the Midwest or down south. So you're looking at businesses not being able to get the services here that they can get elsewhere, whether it's because of the speed or the cost. We lost that business in downtown Keene. Thankfully, they stayed in Keene because they were able to find a location that was on the Fast Roads network. But that's what we're facing, and they're not alone. There are other businesses who are calling me asking for similar help.
One of the initiatives that was discussed was the dig once, meaning that if the gas company is digging a trench to put in a pipe, put in a pipe for the internet lines, for this last mile. Confusion there is, so we're going to have a bunch of little segments of pipe, eventually we'll connect the segments. And apparently we need a plan of some sort, not just throwing pipes in the ground, but it's critical. Literally, you can't jump Church Street. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. George, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Councilor Greenwald. You said something tonight that I think is a really important point that I want to highlight, and that's the fact that this is really going to be a multi-pronged approach, and we need a cohesive strategy that we're all able to move forward with on a consistent basis. I, for one, hope that this report does not end up on a shelf, which you can probably tell by my being very forceful in wanting to move these things forward, because I think every counselor, everybody in Keene, really should be thinking about these issues, and we should have economic development at the front of all of our minds, because it solves a lot of our problems. You know, a lot of things can be helped and aided by promoting Keene, by bringing business to Keene, by promoting economic development. So I hope that we do that, and I thank you, Councilor Greenwald, for kind of bringing it all together in a cohesive way, and I hope that you'll continue to do so.
Thank you. And thank you for your participation.
Alrighty. Bart, please.
One last comment. Again, thank you for your work on this. I think that the last recommendation, which is outreach, is really critical, and I'm really glad that you worked on it and specified so many different opportunities for outreach. I think the city website as a portal for information is critical. I went online and researched some websites for other cities, and ours is good, but there are some other websites out there that are just phenomenal and so easy to navigate, and you can easily, as a businessman, you would be able to get all the information right there instead of trying to navigate through all this. But what I wonder is, as a portal city website, is there a way to maybe collaborate with all these other businesses, maybe with and combine the resources for creating a website? I don't believe that the city has a resource to revamp this. I guess we'll need to hire a consultant for that work. I wonder if there's a way to collaborate with other businesses, with Keene State, with Antioch, with private businesses, and put this as a priority in the development of this proposal.
I think it's a great idea. And there was conversation that there's a city website, but there should be a major jump to a commercial industrial website, a development website in
Yep.
your world.
Right. There are two things I'd like to say. One is the city website is getting a refresh. We will have a completely new design out within the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's been in development for about 4 months now, And we hope to have it out a couple months ago, but we really want it to be the best it can be, so we delayed it. And we're working with a local firm on doing that. So we agree with you, and navigation is the #1 priority. So that's going to change quite a bit. I do concur with what Councilor Greenwald said about having an independent website strictly focused on economic development. Obviously, we'll have to have some economic development content on the city website. However, having a site that site selectors can go to and potential developers can go to that says, okay, here's what I need to know about available properties, here's what I need to know about possible incentives, here's who I need to contact if I run into a problem or I have a question. There really needs to be a very focused online effort for that purpose. And so whether we do that, we do have some talent in-house to do that, or we work with a contractor. Both are, I think, options for something that's important. I agree with you.
Everyone from the committee, all right for the moment? All right, from the public, who would like to talk about this?
Or from the committee.
Please.
Mike Giacomo, 39 Union Street, and a member of the Economic Development Committee with Councilor Greenwald and Councilor Hansel. I just want to elaborate a little bit. I think a lot of the ideas that were mentioned kind of towards the end really tie very closely together. This includes the marketing outreach, which is either a position or, at the very least, an initiative. And that's going to tie very closely in with the rebranding effort as well. And the rebranding we're discussing is not necessarily strictly a rebranding of the code enforcement, which, again, is kind of an odious term in ways. We want that department to really be something that draws people into the town, not provides them a hurdle to get over to get into the town. And as part of that, hopefully we'll be able to tie all that in together and as such really remake the entire process by which a company would go through to get into the city to begin with. So as excuse me, as they referenced earlier, we're talking about a portal that they can go to in the city site that instantly the first thing they look at is, oh, how do businesses get established in Keene? Why would I move to Keene? And then once you're there, have the process of onboarding be completely streamlined. Much more so than it is today. It should not be hoops to jump through, but rather there is either someone or a revised process that can actually hold their hand, guide them through the process to get their feet on the ground in Keene, and hopefully get their foundation for their business on the ground in Keene as well. So these things really all tie together. All those last segments all really connect cohesively, hopefully, and that's really the vision that we had as part of the committee. So just want to kind of connect all that together.
Thank you. Anyone else from the committee like to weigh in? Your Honor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kendall Lane, Mayor. First off, I want to thank the members of the committee for the work that they did, for the effort that they put into this, and for the importance that they attached to the necessity of economic development as we go forward as a way to address a number of the issues that are important to this city. I mean, whether we're talking about housing, whether we're talking about broadband, whether we're talking about any of the number of issues that the city faces, economic development is really at the root of all of those issues. And without economic development, none of the others can be addressed. A couple of things that are going on in addition to the economic development plan. We're in the process, and this committee is involved with it, in looking at our land use code. Our land use code is incredibly out of date. It is not user-friendly. It is not development-friendly. That is a necessary part of going forward with an economic development plan for the city. And I would urge City Council, but I would also urge members of the public to be involved and move forward with that initiative as well as the economic development initiative. Secondly, and Councilor Greenwald started to mention it, is that this is not the end of the line. This is really only the beginning of the line. We really need to look at economic development phase 2, which is really the implementation, not just of one or two of the items that are in here, but all of the items that are in here that in fact this has to be a comprehensive plan going forward as to how we address the economic development issues facing this city. Finally, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we talk about bringing industry into Keene. We also have a lot of industry in Keene that we also need to pay attention to. This afternoon, I met with a local company that is bursting at the seams. Right now, they're looking at either a 25 to 30,000 square foot building or 2.5 acres upon which they can build. They can't find them. Neither one of those are readily accessible in the city. We need to pay attention to how local businesses that are already in existence, that are already here, that want to expand, that want to grow, that want to prosper, hire more people, pay more taxes, how we assist them in achieving their goals and their success. That's critically important. We talk a lot about bringing industry in here. Quite frankly, it's a lot easier to deal with the industry we already have and help them grow than it will be to bring new industry in. So I don't want to lose sight of those things. I think that they are equally important. But as we go forward, I think as we look at the implementation of the economic development plan, we really do have to pay attention to the other factors that are also impacting on economic development in the city of Keene. But I think that as a beginning, as a way to raise the attention of the people in Keene to the needs, to the issues that we're facing, to some of the things that need to happen for economic development to be successful. I think this is a wonderful start. I commend the committee. I think that they've done an excellent job, and I look forward to the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, please.
Yeah, thank you. Seeing as the manager and substitutes get to do a lot of this work, a little bit of clarification and a little bit of conversation, I think, might be prudent and helpful. We do have 3 motions that were sent to the City Council, and we have that information, and that'll get voted on by the next City Council meeting, at the next City Council meeting, as well as what you do tonight with the general report. I did ask Rebecca to send me a listing of the items, basically, that need to be taken care of, so I'm going to read them into the record, if you don't mind. And these were actually extracted from the PowerPoint that was presented to the City Council. So the first is create the BART and start meeting, and that's one of your action items. The second is create community development department, and I think Councilor Greenwald explained a lot of the reasoning behind it. And Mitch, just for the record, 15 years ago I made that suggestion for the same reason.
I'm glad I didn't offend you.
No, you didn't, because I've been trying to do that for 15 years. I don't know, however, if it would really be called the Community Development Department, just for a little bit of artistic license. It might be something a little different, but it certainly won't be code enforcement. Okay. Update land use code, which is underway. We know that. Adopt a 79E resolution. We talked about that. And of course, when we draw up the ordinance, we'll bring forward all of the pros and cons and difficulties and items. Then you get into things like inventory downtown amenities and promote, broadband, next century dig once policy, create and distribute development opportunities package, brand Keene, create website and maintenance plan, use targeted social media, inventory developable properties, get current info into state's Choose NHCOM database, implement CIP prioritization mechanism, and apply for grants. Now, a number of these are not normal functions of city government or haven't been in the past, and they may take a little bit of thinking and whatnot as far as how we accomplish those. Some of them, like writing an ordinance, obviously is. The BART, I've had some conversations with some of you about the BART to get some feel for what that is and what that should be, potentially. So for my help in doing this as we begin to develop this, begin to develop some ideas. Is it your intention to reconstitute, and you don't have to answer this tonight, you have till next Thursday. Is it your intention to reconstitute the committee to be the sounding board for these ideas? Or as we develop these ideas, we bring them back to the PLD and the city council, and maybe the committee works on something else? I think that's probably an important thing. We have these specific items, and some of these will need to be developed with ideas. I can't remember who mentioned the fact that the economic development may need a position or may need, somebody assigned in the community to work on it. A lot of these ideas indicate that somebody is going to do this work. We have to figure out who that is. We can bring some plans back for that, but there's probably a lot of ideas, even along the mayor's ideas of retention, that probably need a lot more development. And even when you begin to do things like, if you inventory developable properties, okay, what do you do with them then? Right? Does the committee then become the outreach? Is the BART the outreach? So there's some further work that needs to take place, and it would help me as I begin to develop a plan for y'all to have some ideas as to how you want to push this out.
Well, my thought was this: we go to full council first, get approval, so now we're good to go, and then we come back. I actually thought to this committee and then solve all the rest of those questions, but I'll ask the chairman or the mayor if you have any further thoughts. That would be the process we would take.
Where there are so many choices, reconstituting the committee to advise the PLD, I think, is a good way to go with it. And it's an open meeting, so you're all welcome to stop by. I don't know who His Honor is going to put on it or whatever.
See, my thought is, yes, you do have a lot of recommendations that we would come back, prioritize. If you're going to reconstitute the committee, then, do we set a priority list and say these are the things we want to go through? City manager is going to handle these because he's already going to do that, and it's part of what he does, the rest of these. All right, we send them back to the development committee to come up with ideas. I mean, that was my first take, but how's that sound, Your Honor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kendall Lane, Mayor. The reason for reconstituting the committee, in my view, is the focus, is to really keep that focus right on economic development. City council committees have a lot of work they do. Economic development is part of a wide sphere of things that they are involved in. If we have the committee to just focus on economic development, it is still advisory, and it would be advisory to planning licenses and development, so that whatever recommendations that they ultimately make as we prioritize this would come back to PLD. PLD would make the final decision. PLD would have to actually do the implementation, but it would at least provide a sounding board, a mechanism for keeping that focus very narrow and very pinpointed on economic development.
Yep.
So we should make that part of the recommendation, that council approval, and then back to the Economic Development Committee for
Part 2.
Part 2. Yeah, further delineation and prioritization, right?
Part 2.
Part 2.
Bart.
Part 2.
And we all get T-shirts with a B on it.
Phil,
So
please.
that part 2 would be part of the suggested motion by the Chairman Greenwald. The second part that says, have the city manager suggest a plan for implementation. Part 2 would be part of that plan. We don't need to include that in the motion. Correct, Mr. Manager?
I am at your beck and call.
Okay.
Likely suggests that the mayor reform or form a Part 2 committee.
That'd be a
It's the
second
mayor's.
motion.
If I may,
Got
Mr.
to
Chairman.
reconstitute us.
Thank you. Once this occurs, I'll sit down with staff and we'll start fleshing this out in a broader aspect and probably bring back some ideas in the broader aspect. One of which, of course, would be the committee itself and its reconstitution and its membership. Because I think once the committee takes an action form, it may be a little different or may need to be a little different. Not saying it will be, but it may, if that's okay with the committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Phil?
And that also wouldn't be part of the motion because it's the mayor who reconstitutes and sets the charge, so that would be up to him.
Oh, and if I can request that you put in there, time being of the essence. This is not come back in 2 months, it's 2 weeks.
Well, I need some wording then.
Just say time being of the essence.
Okay.
With the utmost of urgency. How's that?
Yeah.
Phrase.
Mr. Chairman?
You think you got something, Phil? You want to?
Yeah, sounds fine.
Yeah, just a little clarity. Are we talking about the broad implementation plan in 2 weeks, or the committee?
Reconstituting us.
The committee?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, that would be the mayor's
Yeah,
call.
because I'd have to drop an awful lot of stuff to do the rest.
No problem.
Yeah. You just said Beck and call. I heard Beck and call only moments ago. Okay, you think you got it?
Yeah, the reconstitution is the mayor's call. I don't need to include that. I think you heard the message. You ready?
I'm ready.
Did you go to public?
He's going to try.
Phil's going to try.
So if that would mean then that other councilors couldn't speak, right?
Correct.
So
Would you like your
Speak now.
I would, yeah.
Please.
What are you waiting for?
What?
Don't be shy.
Believe me, I'm not shy. Carl Jacobs, Ward 2 City Councilor. I think this is a great piece of work and very exciting for the future. One thing that I particularly want to emphasize is the Cheshire County and surrounding municipalities. I think, from what I understand, I've been working on some regional issues, marketing and whatnot, and we've looked around at other areas in the New England and the country, and it seems like when regions get together and do marketing, they can be more effective than if each of the 22 towns in Cheshire County tried to market itself. And I think housing is another area where perhaps there are some regional solutions because very many people either live in Keene and work in another community or live in another community and work in Keene. So the idea that Keene is just this little island and economic island, I think we need to really think regionally. And so I was glad to see that, and I hope we continue to emphasize that going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public before we get the motion? And
Can I
Phil, please.
just see? I also want to thank the committee for the job they did. This was, I know it was a lot of work. They did a great job. And the good part is we're seeing some deja vu all over again. Some of the items that you have here are part of the comprehensive master plan implementation. Also, some of the things that on the city council goals committee that we discussed. So I'm glad everyone's kind of thinking along the same lines. So thank you to the committee for doing this. Want a motion?
Please.
I would recommend, the PLD recommend to the full city council the adoption of the economic action plan and request the city manager suggest a plan for implementation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Bearing in mind everything that was said, that will be reflected in the minutes, right? Bill,
Yeah, I
please.
just want to make sure the minutes reflect the request for the mayor to reconstitute the committee. Okay, thank you. It's not part of the motion because that's his doing. Okay.
All righty. So we have a motion and a second. Anything further from the public? All right, there being none. Anything further from the committee? There being none. Again, outstanding work. We're at step one, right? And this is the path we need to take. So, with that said, all in favor? Opposed? There being none. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to start going through all the details.